Everyone, my name is Mike Blight of Blight Now. This video I want to talk a little bit about the situation that unfolded with Riot Games and Team Impulse, forcing Team Impulse to, if and hopefully when, sell their spot in the LCS. The TLDR is actually linked below in the description of the video, but essentially what happened is that for some time now there has been some sort of contract dispute with the players and the management wherein they actually falsified information that they submitted to Riot Games to say that all the players had contracts for the regular split and that they should have been paid, wherein the reality is that these players unfortunately have not been paid, and including substitutes like Executioner Ken, who is posted on Reddit, and Gate, who was their top mid support multiple lane player, has also had payments that haven't been made. So ultimately what this tells us is that a once sort of famed franchise in a way, LMQ, that came from China, Chinese-backed foundation that later turned into Team Impulse, had a very mismanaged community manager or whoever it was that was in charge of all the contracts and all the relationships that were with the organization and the team. So when we're thinking about this, the one thing that we have to note is that this almost famed franchise in a way that had Ackerman, who was previously godlike of Royal Club, Vasily, who was very popular in a lot of ways, Zhao Weizhao, who was eventually banned for elo boosting. This once great team, once the funders and the people that were supporting it decided to pull back and focus their energies into their team in China, the remnants of the team and the organization sort of crumbled. And we even saw sort of hints of greatness in a lot of ways with an Apollo, Adrian bot lane that of course later went on to Dignitas and Immortals. But this next iteration of the team almost was a laughingstock within the NALCS, which is a shame because it started off very positively. As a matter of fact, when they were coming up through the challenger scene as LMQ, they beat out Cloud9 Tempest, and they also beat out Teammate. So it's not as though their road to get to the LCS was sort of easy and something that they just came across and say, hey, let's just make an LCS team. They had to work for it, and once they were here, they had some success, which of course later fell off, okay? And it had me thinking, what responsibilities do we have for the players, and more importantly, what comparisons can we draw between what's happening now and sort of Riot's responsibility with this to other organizations or other things in life. And I thought of two professional sports examples outside of the LCS that we see a similar mismanagement and failure to pay and incentivize the players. The first example, and if you're not familiar with professional basketball or professional baseball, and this might be disinteresting to you, but the first example is in 2010, the NBA purchased the Charlotte Hornets from the owner, George Shinn, for $300 million. Essentially what happened was, it was basically a series of unfortunate events for the Charlotte Hornets, which basically moved to New Orleans in 2002. In 2005, for the non-Americans, Hurricane Katrina happened, completely devastated the city of New Orleans, which forced the team to relocate in 2005 to Oklahoma City in 2007 before they returned back to New Orleans. Now, there were sort of silver lining in that they found out that they could take the Seattle team, the Sonics, and make them into OKC, but that's neither here nor there. But essentially what happened was the team was completely mismanaged, the NBA stepped in, bought the team, and they made sure that the players were compensated for whatever their salaries were, and everything was managed well enough so that the franchise didn't completely die out. Now, that's not to say that Riot necessarily needs to take in Team Impulse and maintain it, because the brand and management of Team Impulse is Team Impulse. It would essentially have to look and feel as though Riot Games made almost a Riot Games team, kept those players on staff, and I'm absolutely positive that's not what Riot Games wants to do. So if we bring it to a second example, we think about Major League Baseball. The Montreal Expos were a team that, an expansion team that kind of sucked from 1969 until the early 90s, 1992, where they finally, after all this sort of tumultuous baseball hell that they went through, 20 years of unsuccess in baseball, they started to have winning seasons. Unfortunately, in 1994, there is this giant player strike which left the team in financial ruin, and they actually had to just give away all their best players. And in 2002, after all of this, they're actually bought by the MLB. So similar to the basketball example, they were purchased by the professional organization at which they played under, and then as a result of that, in 2005, they were later moved as the Expos to DC, rebranded as the Nationals, and here we are 11 years later after that giant move, and finally the team's good. I think they're second in their division. So all of a sudden we do see some success. I just don't imagine League of Legends and Riot Games wants to push this process in another 11 years. So what this means in a lot of ways, I guess we would take it in two fronts. The front one is what it means for the players or potential players in the LCS. And the second is what does it mean for potential owners or people who want to invest in League of Legends. So the first case of people, the players, this is a very, very scary proposition because in a lot of ways, if we're thinking about the general player base and who it is that wants to become a new pro, it's usually people right out of high school, 16 to 18 years old. We have plenty of examples of high school kids in a way, and I use that term very affectionately because I teach college students, so they're kids in a lot of ways, who are going in and essentially propose to make a ton of money or a reasonable amount of money given their skill in League of Legends, okay? Their parents or whoever their guardians are and themselves are very cautious because esports are relatively new in a lot of ways. Of course, they've existed for quite some time, but for the most part, new. It's not an established career path, and so we're skeptical. And when we finally get players to come onto this team, they don't officially sign contracts, and a lot of this, again, I'm not putting it on Riot Games because the teams are responsible for actually giving them their salaries and whatever other bonus incentives and sponsorships that they have. But Riot provides a basic stipend for the teams and the players say, hey, here you go, give these out. But for the players, we need something, and we even see Snoop Bay getting involved with sort of a players union to help protect a lot of these people when it comes to contract negotiations. Because at the end of the day, if this is their first actual job, and it's a job that they've basically maybe foregone college or they've sort of passed up on other opportunities, this might be something that negatively and sort of adversely impacts their life. So that's sort of big step number one. For the organizations or the potential organizations that want to get involved, want to invest, they see that a once sort of successful franchise had all these players and decided at the last minute to pull out of the North American market and focus again on the Chinese market. Now, we do see really great investors. As a matter of fact, we see a team like Echo Fox, although they don't have the best team, are actually owned and operated and sort of managed by Rick Fox, a former Laker, which I love Rick Fox. That's awesome. I'm glad that they had that opportunity. So they at least see one investor. They see different investors like Logitech and other tech companies, DX Razer and places like that that have put fair amounts of money into this. And we also see sort of non-traditional, sort of the nerds of the world are now being sponsored by, let's say, Quest Gaming, Quest bars, so nutrition companies. We're having all these different people coming in from these different places, and that's great. Unfortunately, we start to take a couple of steps back when it comes to us looking at how a team like Team Impulse is actually going to completely abandon their team. They're going to mismanage them, and that unfortunately forces the hand of Riot Games. I'm sure Riot did not anticipate or want any of this to come to fruition. As a matter of fact, the fact that they have to put out a competitive ruling post and address it to the public is probably doing more harm than good for them because people start to ask and probably question, rightfully so, well, why isn't Riot just paying their salaries? And I'm sure the way that they have it structured within the teams, they put the responsibility, they relinquish it to the teams, say, here's the money, you give it to the players and stagger in whatever other benefits or incentives there are for joining the team. Unfortunately, other organizations might see this, like a Mark Cuban, and go, that just doesn't seem like a good investment if I'm going to get 1 year of playing time in this. We're going to have basically a below 500 team that isn't going to perform very well. And then at the end of the day, not only do we not have incentives to bring in new players, but we also don't have really the money to continue to dump into this team if they're going to be stuck below mediocrity. I mean, being a okay team actually does have incentives. People will go, oh, well, you know, you're a little bit around, you're looming around 500. Maybe next split, you'll make that jump. When you're a bottom of the pack team, we don't have a draft system in place when it comes to, oh, well, the next best player is selected first overall by Team Liquid. That's not in place. So the ways at which to get players is heavily financially driven. You have teams like TSM that has argued that they pay great amounts of money to support their system. They pay their players, they provide them with health care, and all of that is a great way to incentivize coming to a team. other than just getting paid. Now, if the barometer for success as an organization, or what success looks like on a very basic level, is you pay me the money that you were supposed to pay me, and yet people are not doing that, that starts to make us question, is esports as a whole as legitimate as we would hope it to be? And as it stands now, it almost doesn't feel that way, which is why I'm glad there are people moving forward, lawyers, attorneys, trying to protect these players ahead of time. So, Team Impulse situation, not good. It's going to get better, I would hope, with the amount of resources that we pull into this. They've been forced to May 18th to sell their team, and so hopefully that goes well and that there aren't any hiccups. And the one line that doesn't irk me, but it makes me a little bit suspicious, is Riot says hopefully the team will be inclined and able to negotiate for the assignment of the players' contracts as well. So the idea is that if they sell the team spot to another team or organization that wants to get in, they will want to provide for these players. But sort of as I stated before, I highly doubt these players are going to get picked up in the first place. So if they do, congrats to them. If not, they've spent the past year not getting paid, living in some sort of emotional duress, and now are out of a team, they're out of a job. So we need to make sure that we're protecting all of these players as much as we reasonably can. All right, talk to you soon.